She came from England. He was just an ordinary guy from Indonesia. They met by accident, but fell in love against every rule their families believed in. What happens when love crosses culture, faith, and fear? This is not just a love story. This is about two families, one doubt. Asterisk, asterisk, it was a cloudy afternoon in Yogyakarta, the kind that smelled like rain and dust from old streets. Students were leaving campus, motorbikes rushed by, and the sky was fading into orange. Raka Prasetya sat in a small cafe near the university, his laptop open, finishing a report for an international cultural exchange program. He was tired but calm, the kind of calm you learn from growing up in a world that doesn't always give you what you want, but expects you to smile anyway. Then she walked in, Amelia Walker, a young woman from England, blonde hair tied up loosely, blue eyes scanning the room like she didn't belong, but also didn't care. She carried her laptop, a notebook full of sketches, and a confused look on her face. "Excuse me," she said, her accent sharp yet warm. "Do you know if the Wi-Fi here actually works?" Raka laughed. "Not really. Even the Wi-Fi has commitment issues here." Amelia chuckled, sitting across from him. "Figures. I guess I'll just suffer in silence then." That was how it began. Two strangers sharing a table, a laugh, and a moment they didn't realize would change everything. They talked about random things, food, art, the chaos of Yogyakarta traffic. Raka explained the difference between sambal pedas and sambal manis, while Amelia told him about London rain and how she missed seeing real smiles on people's faces. "You Indonesians smile all the time," she said, "even when things are hard." Raka smiled faintly. "We don't smile because things are easy. We smile because we're still here." That line made her quiet for a moment. It wasn't poetry. It was truth. When Amelia left the cafe that evening, the rain had started to fall. She didn't have an umbrella, and neither did he. They walked together under the awning of small shops, talking about nothing and everything, and for the first time in years, both of them felt seen. Over the next few weeks, they kept bumping into each other in the library, at street food stalls, at late-night study corners. Raka would buy her spicy satay, laughing when she couldn't handle the heat. Amelia would bring him instant coffee from London, pretending it was something special. There were no love confessions, no romantic music, just small things, shared laughter, glances that lasted too long, and long walks under city lights. But people noticed. Whispers spread quickly on campus. Some called Raka Bülhander, teasing him. Others warned him, "Careful, brow. Her world's not like ours." Amelia, on the other hand, faced quiet judgment. Her colleagues at the exchange program gave her polite smiles, but strange looks, the kind that said, "You're crossing a line." Still, they didn't stop. One night, after attending an art exhibition, they walked side by side through the quiet streets of Yogyakarta. The air was cool, the sound of distant prayer echoing softly. "Can I ask you something?" Amelia said. "Sure," Raka replied. "If your family didn't approve of the person you love, what would you do?" Raka took a long breath. "I try to make them understand, but here, family means everything. You don't go against them easily." Amelia looked at him, her eyes serious. "And if they still said no?" Raka hesitated. Then maybe. I'd love quietly. Amelia smiled, almost sadly. I think I'd fight loudly. He looked at her, realizing that between them stood not just language or religion, but two ways of surviving. She fought. He endured. Months passed. Amelia's research program was supposed to end, but she extended her stay. Officially, it was for her cultural study, but Raka knew the real reason. They spent weekends exploring the countryside. He took her to Prambanan Temple at sunrise. She sketched him in her journal while the call to prayer echoed from a nearby mosque. He taught her to eat with her hands. She taught him to dance in the rain. They were happy, but happiness in their world always came with a deadline. Raka's mother began to call more often. Kapan pulang, nak? Ibu rindu. Edad mendekit di sana. He lied softly. Teman kampus ayah, boo. He couldn't tell her about Amelia. He knew what she would say. That love should bring you closer to Allah, not away. That the world outside Indonesia didn't understand faith like theirs. Meanwhile, Amelia faced questions from her parents over video call. So, you're staying longer in Indonesia? Her father asked. Is there someone we should know about? She laughed it off. No, Dad, just work. But when the call ended, she felt that ache, the kind you get when love makes you happy but guilty at the same time. One weekend, Amelia decided to surprise Raka's mother by cooking Indonesian food with him. She wore an apron that said De Percinta, laughing as she tried to fry tempeh. Raka watched her, his heart warm and heavy at once. You're really trying, he said. I want to know your world, she replied softly. Not just the easy parts. Raka smiled, but deep inside, fear grew. He knew the day would come when she'd want to meet his family, and that day would not be simple. That night, as they ate together on the balcony, Amelia looked at the city lights and said, Do you ever feel like we're temporary? Raka froze. What do you mean? I mean this, us, it feels too good to last. He didn't answer. He just looked at her, the woman who came from across the world to be in his life. He wanted to say, no, it's real. It'll last, but his silence said what his heart feared most. Later that night, when Amelia fell asleep beside him, Raka walked outside. The city was quiet except for the sound of crickets and distant motorcycles. He looked at the stars, the same ones his mother always prayed under, and wondered if God would forgive him for loving someone who didn't belong to his world. He didn't realize Amelia had woken up and was watching him from the door. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to, because sometimes love doesn't end with anger. Sometimes it begins with doubt. That night became the first silent crack in what they thought was unbreakable. And as the first rain of December started to fall over Yogyakarta, two hearts in one small city began to ask the same question. Into different languages, can love really survive without blessing? The answer would come soon, but not in the way either of them expected. They say the first sign of real love isn't excitement. It's fear. Not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that makes you realize how much you could lose if things go wrong. The next few months in Yogyakarta were the happiest Amelia had ever known. The days passed slower there. The air smelled of fried banana and wet soil after rain. The nights were filled with the hum of cicadas and the faint echo of prayer drifting across rooftops. Amelia had learned how to ride a scooter, how to say terima kasih without sounding awkward, and how to bargain in traditional markets with grandmothers who adored her accent. Everywhere she went, people smiled at her, some out of curiosity, some out of kindness. She loved it, the warmth, the chaos, the sincerity of it all, and everywhere she went, Raka was there. He became her translator, her guide, her anchor. But lately, something in Raka had changed. He smiled less when she talked about her plans. He avoided calls when his family rang. His phone would vibrate, and he'd silence it, pretending not to notice. Amelia saw it. She just didn't know how to ask. One Sunday morning, they were having breakfast at a small stall near the campus. Amelia was eating bubur ayam, trying to figure out why anyone would put soy sauce on porridge. Raka, she said, half joking, I think your people are obsessed with sauces. Raka smiled faintly. We just like choices, she giggled. Do you think your mom would like me? The spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. For a moment, Raka didn't answer. His expression softened, but his eyes looked far away. My mom's traditional, he said carefully. She's kind, but she sees the world very differently. Amelia nodded, pretending it didn't sting. Different how? She prays 5 times a day, believes everything happens by God's plan. She wants me to marry someone who understands that life. There was a silence that hung between them, the kind that couldn't be filled with laughter. Amelia swallowed hard. And what about you? Raka looked at her, eyes steady but sad. I'm still learning how to balance what I believe and who I love. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She lay on the bed in her rented room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly. The sounds of the neighborhood, dogs barking, distant motorcycles, the call to prayer before dawn, all felt heavier now. She thought of London, of her parents, of how easy life used to feel when she could choose what she wanted, without worrying about hurting anyone. But in Indonesia, love came with more than feelings. It came with consequences. A week later, Raka finally invited her to meet his best friend, Bayu, who worked as a photographer. They met at a coffee shop in the city, a cozy place with soft jazz and the smell of cinnamon. So this is the famous Amelia. Bayu grinned, shaking her hand. You're brave for surviving Yogyakarta heat. Amelia laughed. And spicy food. Bayu liked her instantly. She was open, kind, and didn't pretend to understand everything. But later, when Raka went to order more coffee, Bayu leaned closer. She's great, man, Bayu said quietly. But your mom's not gonna like this. Raka sighed. I know. Then what's the plan? There's no plan yet, Raka admitted. I just want some time before everything gets complicated. Bayu nodded. Time doesn't stop families, bro, especially yours. When Raka returned to the table, Amelia noticed the slight tension in his face. She didn't ask, but she could feel the truth pressing against her chest. As weeks passed, Amelia tried harder to understand Raka's world. She joined him for Ramadan iftar at his friend's house, even though she didn't fast. She covered her hair out of respect for his mother during video calls. Though she wasn't introduced as anyone special, she thought that effort would be enough. But love, in Raka's world, wasn't measured by how much you tried. It was measured by how much you could endure. Then one evening, Raka's mother called again. He answered reluctantly, sitting on the small balcony outside his apartment. Nak, ibu dengar kamu sering sama Bill. Ya, teman kampus ayah. Bu, men. Orang-orang di kampung bilang kalian sering jalan berdua. Kamu lupa, nak, kamu anak siapa? Raka closed his eyes. Ibu, please. Kamu tahu ibu enggak pernah larang kamu belajar. Tapi jangan sampai lupa imanmu. Ya, dunia luar itu luas, tapi enggak semua kokok buat kita. He said nothing. The guilt was already heavier than her words. When the call ended, he sat in silence. Inside, Amelia was preparing dinner, tempeh, and vegetables. The kind he'd once said reminded him of home. Was that your mom? She asked softly. He nodded. Double quotes, she knows about me, doesn't she? Raka didn't answer right away. Not really, but she suspects, and she doesn't approve. He looked up, the pain in his eyes confirming what she already knew. Amelia, he said gently, you're the best thing that's happened to me. But my family, they have their own world, their own beliefs. To them, love isn't enough. Amelia's throat tightened. And to you? Raka's voice broke slightly. To me, love is everything. But I can't ask them to give up their faith, not even for you. For days. The silence between them grew. They still met, but the laughter was thinner, the touch slower. Every word felt like walking on glass. One night, Amelia found him sitting by the window, staring out at the city. I don't want to be your secret, she said quietly. Raka turned to her. You're not. Then why do you act like you're ashamed? He shook his head. I'm not ashamed. I'm scared. Of what? Your family? Your God? Or yourself? He looked away, unable to answer. Amelia felt her chest ache. You keep saying love is everything. But if it's real, shouldn't it make you brave? Raka's voice was low. Maybe love makes us brave, but it also makes us afraid of losing what we already have. She didn't reply. She just nodded, eyes filling with tears she didn't want to show. The next morning, Raka didn't show up for breakfast. He didn't text all day. When Amelia went to his apartment, his roommate said he'd gone home to see his parents. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Raka's family lived on the outskirts of Yogyakarta, in a quiet village surrounded by rice fields. When he arrived, his mother hugged him tightly. His father stayed quiet, reading the newspaper. At dinner, his mother said softly, Nak, ibu cuma mau kamu bahagia, tapi jangan sampai kebahagiaanmu bikin kamu jauh dari jalan yang benar. Raka looked down at his plate. He knew what she meant. He'd known from the beginning. That night, when he stepped outside, the stars were clear above the rice fields. He took out his phone and opened Amelia's message. I miss you. I hope you're okay. He typed, I miss you too, then deleted it before pressing send. Meanwhile, in her small rented house, Amelia sat by the window, the rain falling hard outside. She stared at her phone, waiting for a reply that never came. For the first time since she arrived in Indonesia, she felt completely alone. Her heart whispered things she didn't want to believe, that maybe love isn't enough to survive a family's fear. That maybe, no matter how much you try to understand another world, you'll always be an outsider in it. She wanted to believe Raka would fight for her, but deep down, she already knew the truth. He was fighting himself more than anyone else. The next morning, she packed a small bag and went to the bus terminal. She didn't have a plan, just an impulse to escape, to see something else before everything fell apart. But before she could leave, her phone rang. "Raka, don't go," he said, voice breaking through the noise of traffic. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I'm scared of losing you before I even get the chance to make things right." She closed her eyes, tears spilling down. "Then come find me, Raka. Not as your secret, as someone you're ready to stand for." The line went silent for a moment. Then, softly, he said, "I will. Just give me time." She hung up, clutching her phone tightly, unsure if she should believe him or protect herself before it was too late. That day, the rain kept falling over Yogyakarta. Two people, in the same city but different worlds, sat under the same gray sky, both praying in their own languages for a love that the world might never understand. And somewhere between faith and fear, hope and heartbreak, their story was only just beginning. They thought distance might make things clearer, but sometimes distance doesn't heal. It just gives the silence more room to grow. It had been 2 weeks since Raka went back to his family's home in Yogyakarta. The fields were green, the air smelled of wet earth, and life moved at the slow rhythm of prayer and habit. He told Amelia he just needed time, a little while, he'd said, but Amelia had started to learn that a little, well, could mean forever when spoken by someone. Afraid to choose at first, they texted every day. Simple things. "Good morning. I miss you. Have you eaten?" But as days passed, the messages came later, shorter, colder. Sometimes Raka wouldn't reply for hours, sometimes for days. Amelia tried to be patient. She told herself he was busy, that he needed space to deal with his family. But every time she saw her phone light up, and it wasn't his name, a small part of her heart sank. Meanwhile, at Raka's home, the air was thick with unspoken things. His mother was kind, but her kindness had edges. She would serve him extra food, ask about his studies, and then, casually, ask, "Masisiring samat men bil itu, ya?" Raka tried to keep his tone calm. "Dia komitmen, bu." His mother nodded slowly. "Ibu tahu kamu baik, nak, tapi kamu juga tahu hubungan seperti itu enggak akan mudah." He didn't answer. His father spoke up for the first time that evening, his voice quiet but firm. "Sinta enggak bisa ganti Aiman, Raka. Jangan biarkan perasaan bikin kamu lupa era." Raka swallowed hard, his hands tightening around the spoon. He wanted to explain that Amelia wasn't just some girl, that she tried to understand his world, that she respected everything he believed in. But the words felt useless here. They wouldn't understand that love could be pure even if it came from a different faith. That night, he went to the small rice field behind the house. The air was cool, the stars clear. He pulled out his phone and read Amelia's last message. "I made tempeh today. It didn't explode this time. You'd be proud." He smiled faintly, then sighed. He typed a reply, "I miss you too." But before he could press send, his mother called from the doorway, "Raka, jangan larut di luar, nanti masak angin." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. The message stayed UNSENT. In Yogyakarta, Amelia tried to keep herself busy. She continued her research, volunteered at a local art school, and started teaching English to children in a small community center. The kids adored her. They laughed at her accent when she tried to speak Indonesian and gave her hand-drawn cards. "That's it, terima kasih, Miss Aim." But at night, when she was alone, the silence was unbearable. The city that once felt alive now felt too big, too quiet. Every corner reminded her of him. The coffee shop where they'd met. The street where he taught her how to eat with her hands. The park where he first said she looked too serious when she's happy. She tried calling him a few times, but most of the time, the line went unanswered. When he finally picked up, his voice was distant. "Sorry, Aim, I was with family." "It's okay," she lied. "How are they?" "Good, just asking a lot of questions." "About me?" A pause. "Yeah." "And what did you say?" Another pause. "I said we're friends." The silence that followed felt like a cut. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to hurt every time she breathed. That night, Amelia wrote him a long message, not to accuse, not to beg, but to be honest. "Raka, I know things are hard. I am not angry. I just miss the way you used to talk to me. I came here because I wanted to understand your world, not fight it. But lately, it feels like your world doesn't have space for me anymore. Tell me if I'm wrong. I just need to know where I stand." She stared at the screen for minutes before pressing send. He didn't reply that night, or the next after that. Back in his village, Raka spent his days helping his father in the rice fields, fixing the fence, attending the mosque. Everyone in the neighborhood seemed to know something he didn't say. One evening, after prayer, the local imam placed a hand on his shoulder. "Nak Raka, hati-hati sama perasaan. Kadang cinta bisa jadi ujian yang halus." Raka nodded respectfully. "I know, Ustaz." But deep down, he was tired of hearing that word, ujian, a test. If everything in his life was a test, when would he get to live? Finally, after nearly a week of silence, he opened Amelia's message again. He didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone you love that love itself has become the problem? He started typing. "Aim, I'm sorry. I just don't know what to do anymore. My family." Then he stopped, deleted the whole thing. He turned off his phone. For the first time, Raka let himself cry. Quietly, in the dark, so no one could see. A few days later, Amelia received a package at her door. Inside was a letter, handwritten, folded neatly. The handwriting was Raka's. She held her breath as she opened it. "Aim, I'm sorry for being silent. It's not because I stopped caring. It's because I care too much, and I don't know how to balance it. My mother cried last night when I told her about us. Not because she hates you, but because she's afraid I'll lose myself. I don't know how to make her understand that I can love you without losing my faith. But every word I say makes her fear stronger. You once told me love should make us brave. I'm trying, Aim. I just don't know how to be brave without breaking my family. I still love you. I just don't know what comes next. Raka. Amelia sat on the floor, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She didn't blame him. She couldn't, because deep down, she understood. He was trapped between two kinds of love that both demanded sacrifice. For days, she carried the letter everywhere, in her bag, under her pillow, next to her coffee cup in the morning. It wasn't comfort. It was proof. Proof that what they had was real, even if it wasn't enough. Weeks turned into months. The rainy season began. The streets flooded, and the sky stayed gray for days. Amelia's visa was ending soon. Her friends asked when she'd return to London, but she kept delaying her answer. Then one evening, she received an email from her mother. "Your father's worried. You've been gone too long. Darling, we don't understand what's keeping you there. Come home. We'll talk." She stared at the message for a long time, her heart torn in half. Home. A word that used to sound warm now sounded like surrender. That night, she wrote one last letter. Not an email, not a message, but a real letter on paper. "Raka, I came to Indonesia thinking I could understand your world. I didn't realize I'd end up losing mine in the process. I don't regret loving you. I never will. But I'm starting to think love isn't just about staying. Maybe sometimes love means knowing when to let the other person breathe. If you ever find a way to make peace between your heart and your family, I'll be here, somewhere under the same sky. Love, Amelia." She sealed it, left it with the housekeeper to deliver to Raka's address, and went to bed. The next morning, her flight confirmation to London arrived. She didn't cry. She just looked out the window at the rising sun over Yogyakarta and whispered softly, "Goodbye." Days later, Raka received her letter. He read it alone on the same rice field where he'd once promised himself he'd be brave. He folded it carefully, placed it in his wallet, and whispered, "I'll find you again when I'm ready." But neither of them knew how long that would take, or if the world would still give them a chance when he finally did, because love, once separated by oceans and blessings, rarely returns the same. Sometimes it grows stronger. Sometimes it just becomes memory dot, and somewhere between a prayer in Yogyakarta and a sigh in London, two hearts kept beating for each other, quietly, faithfully, hopelessly. Months had passed since Amelia left Indonesia. London had never felt this lonely. The city that once wrapped her in familiarity now whispered in languages she couldn't understand. Everywhere she went, the memories followed, the way Raka laughed at her broken Indonesian, the smell of rain in Yogyakarta, the sound of azan at dusk that had once comforted her more than she expected. She tried to move on. She threw herself into work, teaching, volunteering, writing. But her heart carried an unfinished sentence, a love story left mid-sentence, waiting for the other person to speak again. Then one afternoon, she received a message from Raka subject, "If you still believe in us, my family wants to meet you. They said they owe it to me, and maybe to you, to try. I don't know what will happen, but I can't keep living in between silence and what-ifs. If you're willing, come back one last time." Her hands trembled as she read it. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even hope. But it was something, a door opening slightly after months of darkness. 2 weeks later, Amelia was back in Indonesia. The air was thick, humid, alive. Her heart pounded as the taxi turned into Raka's neighborhood. Small houses lined with banana trees, children playing barefoot, laughter echoing. When the car stopped, Raka was waiting by the gate. He looked thinner, older. His smile carried both relief and fear. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she whispered back. They didn't hug. They just stood there, unsure how to bridge months of silence with one gesture. Inside, the house smelled of jasmine tea and wood. His mother came out first, a woman with kind but cautious eyes. His father followed, calm but unreadable. Amelia bowed slightly, her voice trembling. "Salamat sore, Ibu, Bapak." His mother nodded politely. "Sore, silakan duduk." The table was already set, dishes of rice, tempeh, and vegetables. But no one touched the food. The silence was heavier than any prayer. Raka sat beside Amelia, his hands folded tightly. His mother spoke first. "Raka bilang kamu tinggal lama di sini dulu, ya?" "Yes, Bu." "Almost a year," Amelia answered, smiling carefully. "Dan selama itu, kamu belajar banyak tentang Indonesia?" "I tried to. I love the people, the culture." His mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Tapi cinta saja enggak cukup, nak. Kadang budaya dan keyakinan itu bukan hal yang bisa diubah begitu saja." Amelia hesitated. "I understand, Bu. I'm not asking him to change. I just love him for who he is." His father finally spoke, voice calm but firm. "Cinta itu ujian, Nana Amelia. Tapi kami juga orang tua. Kami takut kehilangan anak kami, bukan karena kamu. Tapi karena dunia yang berbeda bisa membuat orang lupa kar." Raka's fingers tightened around his glass. I know what you're afraid of, but I haven't forgotten who I am." His father turned to him. "Then prove it. Show that you can keep your faith and still respect ours." The room fell silent again. Outside, the sound of rain began tapping on the roof, soft at first, then harder, as if echoing the tension at the table. Amelia looked down at her plate, her chest heavy. She could feel every unspoken word between them, every fear, every hope, every doubt. Finally, she spoke. "I know you think I'll take him away, but maybe love isn't about taking. It's about walking together. I don't want to change him. I want to understand him." Raka's mother studied her quietly, then said, "Understanding doesn't mean living the same life, nak. When people come from two faiths, two roots, it's not just about you two. It's about the children, the families, the prayers behind every name." Amelia's eyes glistened. "I know. I think about that every day." His mother nodded slowly. "Then you understand why I'm afraid." The silence after that felt almost sacred. No one tried to win. No one raised their voice. Just the sound of rain and the quiet breathing of four people trying to understand. If love could ever fit inside the boundaries of faith and fear. Dinner ended without a conclusion. As Amelia stood to leave, Raka's mother touched her arm gently. "Terima kasih sudah datang, nak." Her tone had softened. There was no acceptance, but there was humanity. And for Amelia, that was enough. Later that night, Raka walked her back to the small guest house nearby. They walked in silence, umbrellas brushing in the rain. I didn't expect her to invite you, Raka said quietly. She didn't look angry. That's a miracle already. Amelia smiled faintly. It's not anger that scares me. It's silence. It feels like I'm talking to a wall made of love and fear. Raka stopped walking. He looked at her, eyes glistening in the streetlight. Aim, I don't know how to make this right. Every time I choose you, I feel like I'm betraying them. Every time I choose them, I lose you. She shook her head. Maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe love isn't about sides. Then why does it feel like everyone keeps asking me to? He laughed bitterly. The rain soaked his hair. I used to think love could fix everything. Now I think love just shows us what's broken. Amelia reached out, touched his face gently. And maybe that's still worth something. They stood under the rain, eyes locked, hearts exhausted, but unwilling to let go. The next day, Raka's mother visited Amelia at the guest house, unexpectedly, quietly. She brought a box of food, homemade, ini. Buat sarapan, she said softly. Amelia smiled, surprised. Thank you, Boo. His mother sat across from her, hands folded. Saya tidak mau kamu salapam. Saya tidak benci kamu. Saya hanya takut anak saya terlalu baik sampai dia lupa jalan pulang. Amelia nodded, tears forming. I understand. I would be afraid to. The older woman studied her face for a long time. This foreign girl, far from home, crying not for herself, but for someone else's son. Then she whispered, Kalau memang jodoh, Tuhan pasti kasih jalan. Tapi jangan paksa pintu yang belum waktunya dibuka. She stood, placed her hand gently on Amelia's shoulder, and left. Amelia sat there for a long time, holding back tears. For the first time, she didn't feel rejected, only small and human, and painfully aware that love sometimes had to wait for permission from time itself. That night, she met Raka again by the old river bridge, the same place where they once dreamed out loud. She came to see me, Amelia said softly. Your mother. Raka looked surprised. She did. She told me not to force the door before it's ready to open. He smiled sadly. That sounds like her. They stood side by side, the river glowing under the moonlight. So what happens now? She asked. He took a deep breath. Now, we wait. We become stronger. Maybe someday, they'll see that loving you doesn't mean losing myself. Amelia nodded slowly. And if that day never comes? He looked at her, really looked, and said, then at least we tried to love the right way. They didn't say goodbye that night. They didn't make promises either. Just stood quietly, holding each other's hands while the river carried away their fears. For the first time, it wasn't silence that filled the space between them. It was understanding. And maybe that was enough for now, because love, in its truest form, doesn't always need to win. Sometimes it just needs to exist, quietly, faithfully, until the world is ready to understand. When Amelia's plane left Yogyakarta, the city below her looked smaller than she remembered. The rice fields, the winding roads, the little roofs where laughter once lived, all fading beneath the clouds like a story being folded away. She stared out the window until the lights disappeared. She didn't cry this time. Maybe she had already used up all her tears. London welcomed her with cold rain and gray skies, the kind that smelled like metal and memory. Her apartment felt emptier than before. The same books, the same coffee mug, but somehow everything carried his shadow. She went back to work, went out with friends, smiled when people asked how her trip to Indonesia was. Beautiful, she would say, because it was easier than explaining how beautiful things could still break your heart. At night, she would sit by the window, cup of tea in hand, scrolling through old photos, Raka laughing beside a street vendor, his hand reaching out for hers. Their shadows tangled together under the sunset. It all felt like another life now. Back in Yogyakarta, Raka returned to routine, morning prayers, helping his father at the small shop, pretending that life had returned to normal, though he knew it hadn't. Sometimes, when he passed by the guest house she stayed in, he slowed his steps, as if expecting her to walk out again with that unsure smile and messy hair. She never did, but her presence lingered in the way his mother left jasmine tea on the table, in the quiet glances his father gave him before dinner. One evening, his mother sat beside him while he was fixing an old radio. Kamu masih sering mikirin dia? He didn't look up. Sometimes, Ibu juga. That made him stop. He turned slowly. You do. She nodded. Waktu dia pamit, dia bilang sesuatu. What did she say? Dia bilang, dia enggak mau jadi alasan kamu kehilangan keluarga. Raka stared at his mother, eyes stinging. She said that. Iya. His mother sighed softly. Dia perempuan baik. Tapi kadang, dua orang baik belum tentu bisa berjalan di jalan yang sama. He looked down. Maybe not now. His mother's voice softened. Kalau Tuhan mau, nanti bisa. Tapi kamu harus jadi lelaki yang kuat dulu. Kuat buat pilih, buat tanggung jawab. He nodded silently. Weeks passed. Then months. Amelia began to write again. Essays, short stories, letters she never sent. One of them started like this: love isn't about choosing sides. It's about learning to stand in the middle of a storm without forgetting who you are. Her writing was raw and honest. She sent one of her pieces to an online journal about cross-cultural relationships. A week later, they published it. It went viral. People from all over the world left comments. Women who loved men from different faiths. Men who left their homes for love. Parents who lost their children to fear and pride. Some said her story gave them hope. Others said it reminded them of pain they'd buried for years. But one message stood out. Sent from an anonymous email with only one line. You wrote what I couldn't say. She smiled through tears. He'd found her words. Back in Indonesia, Raka was changing too. He applied for a scholarship, the same one that had brought him to London years ago. But this time, it wasn't to run away. It was to learn, to grow, to prove to himself and his family that love and faith didn't have to be enemies. His father was the first to find out. London lagi? He asked quietly, holding the printed email. Yes, pack, for research. Only 6 months. His father didn't answer right away. He just looked at him, long, searching. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled faintly. Kalau kamu yakin birangkala. Tapi jangan lupa kamu pilih karena panggilan bukan pelarian. Raka nodded. heart pounding. I won't forget. Meanwhile, in London, Amelia got an invitation to speak at a small seminar on cultural empathy. How love could cross borders, but still respect differences. She hesitated at first. Then she said yes. The event was held at a small university hall. Intimate, quiet, warm. She spoke with calm confidence, but inside, her heart raced. We talk a lot about compromise in love, she said, but sometimes compromise is another word for waiting. Waiting for understanding, for timing, for healing. Love doesn't always need to win. Sometimes it just needs to be kind. When she finished, the room fell silent for a moment. Then applause filled the space. And then, in the back row, she saw him. Our aka. Standing still, eyes wet, smiling that same shy smile she had dreamed about for months. For a second, she thought she was imagining him. But when he walked toward her, the world stopped. You're really here, she whispered. I told you I'd find you when I was ready, he said softly. They stood there, two people who had lost each other once, now meeting not because of fate, but because both had chosen to grow. After the seminar, they walked through the quiet London streets, the same ones they once shared. The rain had just stopped, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement. My mother sent you something, Raka said, handing her a small envelope. Inside was a short letter, written in careful handwriting. Amelia, thank you for loving my son sincerely. I still don't know what the future holds, but I've learned that good hearts speak the same language. Pray for us as we pray for you. Amelia pressed the letter to her chest. She wrote this. She did. Raka smiled. After reading your story online, Amelia laughed softly, tears forming again. Guess the internet really can change hearts. No, Raka said, shaking his head. You did. They stopped by the Thames, the water calm under the city lights. This was where it had all started, where two strangers from different worlds had first dared to believe that love could bridge anything. So, what now? She asked, half laughing, half crying. He took a deep breath. Now, we take it slow. No promises. No pretending. Just truth. She smiled through tears. And if the world still says no, he reached for her hand. Then we'll make our own yes. The night breeze wrapped around them, carrying the faint sound of a church bell in the distance, mingling with the soft echo of a prayer from his phone alarm. Two worlds, two faiths, one moment of peace. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, they didn't need to, because love wasn't their ending anymore. It was their beginning, quiet, uncertain, but finally honest. Years passed quietly, like gentle rain washing over time. The world had changed. So had they. Amelia had built a new rhythm in her life. Mornings filled with work at the cultural center. Evenings spent teaching children about language and empathy. She wasn't the same girl who once chased love across oceans. She had learned that sometimes the bravest thing love could do was wait. And Raka, he'd finished his research, returned to Indonesia, and started teaching at a university in Yogyakarta. He had grown calmer, steadier. Every time his students asked why he always spoke about compassion and understanding, he smiled and said, because the hardest lesson I ever learned didn't come from books. They didn't see each other for a long time, not because they didn't want to, but because both understood they needed to heal separately first. Still, letters found their way between them, short, simple ones. The jasmine tree in front of my house bloomed again. It smells like the evening we first met. I read your article about interfaith dialogue. I'm proud of you. Are you happy? I think I'm learning to be. Love hadn't ended. It had simply changed shape from fire to light. Then, one summer afternoon, Amelia received an invitation that made her hands tremble. You are warmly invited to speak at the University of Yogyakarta for the annual event on culture and understanding, hosted by Professor Raka. Her lips parted in disbelief. Professor, the boy who once couldn't find words at a dinner table, was now teaching others how to bridge hearts. She stared at the invitation for a long time before whispering, "Maybe it's time." When Amelia arrived in Indonesia again, the air felt different, softer, familiar, forgiving. The university was buzzing with life. Students waved and smiled as she entered the hall. And there he was, standing near the podium, wearing a simple white shirt, looking exactly the same and completely different at once. Their eyes met. It wasn't a spark this time. It was peace. "Welcome back," he said softly. "It's good to be back," she replied. After the event, Raka took her to a small cafe near campus. Quiet, hidden, filled with the smell of coffee and rain. They talked for hours, not about the past, but about everything else. Their work, their families, their mistakes, their healing. Finally, Amelia asked the question she had held in her heart for years. "Did your parents ever forgive me?" Raka smiled gently. "There was nothing to forgive. After you left, my mother said something I'll never forget." He looked at her with warmth. She said, "If a woman can make you a better man even from far away, maybe she was never meant to be lost." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. She said that, "Yes, she prays for you sometimes. Still does." Amelia laughed softly, wiping her tears. "Tell her I pray for her too." A few days later, Raka invited her to his family home, the same house she once entered years ago, trembling with fear and hope. This time, it felt different. His mother greeted her with a warm smile, not guarded, not cautious, just real. "Amelia, finally, you came home." The words almost broke her. She bowed deeply. "Thank you, Boo." His father came out too, older now, slower, but his eyes softer than ever. "So this is the woman who made my son write books about compassion," he said, chuckling. Everyone laughed. The heaviness that once filled this house was gone. They all sat around the same wooden table, the same table that once witnessed silence and fear. Now, it held laughter, stories, and cups of tea shared without hesitation. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. And that simplicity made it sacred. Later that evening, after his parents went to rest, Raka and Amelia sat outside under the night sky. The stars looked like old friends. "Do you ever think," she began softly, "that maybe everything had to happen exactly the way it did, so we could meet like this again?" Raka smiled. "Yes, if we hadn't broken, we wouldn't have understood how to build something honest." "Do you think love gets easier when you're older?" "No," he said, laughing. "But I think faith does." They sat in silence for a while. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring. It wasn't new. It looked worn, real, touched by time. "This isn't a proposal," he said gently. "It's a promise that no matter where our paths go, I'll keep choosing peace over pride. And you'll keep being the reason I believe good hearts can change the world." She took the ring, her hands trembling. "Then I promise too, that I'll keep believing love doesn't have to win to be true." The crickets sang. The night wind carried the scent of jasmine, the same kind his mother once placed on the table years ago, when silence ruled their hearts. But now, it wasn't silence. It was serenity. Months later, photos began circulating online. A university event on cultural unity. In one picture, Raka and Amelia stood side by side, smiling. The caption read, "Love once separated by belief, now united by understanding." And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew that rescue, the blessing they had once begged for, had finally arrived. Not in the form of permission, but peace. Not from their families, but from the quiet acceptance within themselves. One evening, before returning to London again, Amelia visited Raka's parents alone. She helped his mother prepare tea, and together they talked about everything and nothing. Before leaving, his mother took her hands and said softly, "Walk to Ichu. Saya taka kamu akan membuat anak saya lupa Tuhannya. Tapi ternyata kamu justru membuat dia lebih mengenal Tuhan." Amelia's tears fell freely. "He made me believe again too, Boo. Just in a different way." They hugged a long, quiet embrace that said everything words couldn't. When Amelia left Indonesia this time, she didn't look back in sadness. She looked forward in gratitude. And as her plane lifted into the golden sky, she whispered to herself, "Some love stories aren't meant to end in marriage. They're meant to end in peace." In Yogyakarta, Raka stood outside, watching the same plane fade into the horizon. His mother joined him, holding two cups of tea. "You miss her already?" she asked gently. He smiled. "I don't think I ever stopped." "Then pray for her. Always," he said. They stood together in silence, as the wind carried the sound of a distant call to prayer. And somewhere above, across oceans and clouds, Amelia whispered her own prayer too. Two prayers in two worlds, no longer separated by doubt, just connected by faith, by forgiveness, by love that finally found its rescue. Asterisk the end, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Sometimes love doesn't end with a kiss. Sometimes it ends with understanding. Amelia and Raka didn't walk down the aisle. They didn't promise forever in front of a crowd or exchange vows under the stars. But what they found was something deeper than forever. They found peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop fighting for what love should be and start accepting what love already is. Maybe they were never meant to be husband and wife. Maybe they were meant to be two souls who met to change the way their families, and maybe even the world, understood love. Because love isn't always about staying together. Sometimes it's about growing separately, but still praying for each other in every quiet night. Years may pass. They might never sit at the same table again. But somewhere between London and Yogyakarta, between two different prayers, between two families who finally learned to listen, their love still lives. Not in photos, not in rings, but in peace. And if you ever find yourself torn between your heart and the world, remember them. Remember that love doesn't need to win to be true. It just needs to be honest.